My girlfriend's best friend destroyed our relationship with lies. But the truth behind it left me speechless. I'm 22 and have a girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend, named Elle. She was kind, funny, and I fell for her at first sight. Our relationship was pretty normal. We'd have arguments sometimes, but I'd send her flowers or something nice and things would get back to normal. At least that's what I thought. I never imagined we'd end up breaking up quietly just because of her best friend Stacy. Stacy and Elle had been best friends since childhood and went to Yale together. While Elle was sweet and gentle, Stacy was toxic and always overreacting about everything. I ignored it at first since I didn't really care about her, but what happened next made me rethink everything. In my last semester, I got a 0 on an assignment worth 40% of my grade. When I emailed my professor asking why, he said I'd submitted a blank document. I checked what I'd turned in, and somehow all my work was gone. I broke down and went to Elle's place for support. But when I told her what happened, she gave me this weird smirk. I asked her what's so funny. "It's me, I deleted your assignment," she calmly said. I started crying. This assignment determined whether I'd graduate. She knew I'd promised my grandma before she passed that I'd be the first in our family to get a college degree. When I asked why she'd delete my work, she said it was because I'd been cheating. She showed me screenshots Stacy had sent her of my Tinder profile. I was shocked and told her it was an old profile from before we dated. To prove it, I downloaded Tinder right there and tried logging in. Of course, it failed. Elle demanded to know why her friend would send those screenshots, and I said maybe because she's crazy. We went to bed angry, leaving things unresolved. A few days later, Elle and Stacy walked by the campus cafe where I was working on a project with a classmate. I smiled and waved at them before getting back to work. But Stacy had to make it into something. She started whispering to Elle about how cute my classmate was and how I'd probably picked her as my project partner just to get with her. She went on about how close we were sitting and how much I was laughing with her. That night, when Elle got back to her dorm, she was already worked up. She confronted me about the girl from the cafe, accusing me of keeping secrets. I tried explaining she was just a classmate and we were finishing an assignment, but Elle wasn't having it. Stacy had gotten in her head again. The conversation just spiraled from there. When I pointed out that Stacy was the one feeding her these lies, Elle immediately jumped to her defense. "My friend never lies to me. You're the liar here." Everything I said just made things worse. I'd always felt like I was competing with Stacy for Elle's attention. I brought up this one time when I'd spent weeks getting a reservation at this nice restaurant Elle really wanted to try, but she canceled at the last minute because Stacy had just broken up with her boyfriend and needed her. I understood at the time, but looking back, it was a pattern. Anytime we had plans, if Stacy needed something, I got pushed aside. I told Elle I knew Stacy always came first. She tried justifying it, saying Stacy was going through a rough time, but I couldn't help pointing out how what was going on with us never seemed to matter when Stacy was involved. Elle wasn't ever my priority when Stacy was around. She got super defensive, insisting Stacy would never do something as petty as lie just to mess up our relationship. In her mind, Stacy was just trying to protect her. If anyone was lying, it had to be me. By the time she grabbed her keys and stormed out, I was just standing there feeling like I couldn't win. No matter how much I tried explaining myself, her trust in me was gone. Later that week, Stacy invited Elle to a party, pitching it as a way to clear her head after all our drama. It seemed harmless enough. I was actually relieved she'd get a break from everything. At the party, they were just hanging out, having drinks, and talking to people while I was across the room with some friends. No big deal. I was just catching up with people, laughing, and having a normal time. But then Stacy spotted me from across the room. She made her move, leaning in close to Elle, whispering something while pointing me out. I don't know exactly what she said, but whatever it was, it flipped a switch in Elle. I watched Elle's expression change completely from across the room. She went from relaxed and smiling to ice cold in seconds, like she'd just caught me committing some horrible crime. She stormed right up to me, eyes blazing. "So this is what you're doing now? Flirting with other girls while I'm right over there? Acting like everything's fine?" I was totally blindsided. "What are you talking about?" I asked. She said she saw me laughing with them, getting all close like she didn't even matter, and now I was sitting there playing innocent while clearly moving on to someone else. It felt like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I tried telling her I wasn't flirting with anyone. We were literally just talking, but she wouldn't hear it. Her mind was already made up thanks to whatever Stacy had been whispering in her ear. She accused me of lying the whole time, saying she could see what was really going on. I tried explaining again, more desperate now, but she cut me off with tears in her eyes. She said I never cared about her, and just like that, she stormed out of the party. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe, and all I could think was, how did things go south so fast? That's when it really hit me. It was all Stacy. She'd been pulling the strings this whole time. The next morning, I knew something was different the second I walked in. Her face was blank, but you could cut the tension with a knife. Without saying a word, she tossed her phone on the table. The screen was lit up with what looked like screenshots of text between me and some random girl. The messages were flirty, but they weren't mine. And surprise, surprise, they came from Stacy. "You've been lying to me," Elle said. "First the party, then the cafe, and now this? Stacy was right about you all along." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I tried explaining that none of it was real, that I hadn't sent those messages, but Elle wasn't listening. She'd already made up her mind about what happened. "How can I believe anything you say anymore?" she asked. "Every time I try to trust you, something else comes up. This is just the final straw." I tried staying calm, but inside I was losing it. I begged her to understand that Stacy had been trying to come between us from the start. She didn't want us to work out, and now she was using these fake screenshots to push Elle even further away. Elle crossed her arms and looked away. "Stacy's my best friend. She wouldn't make this up. Why would she?" And there it was again, Stacy. No matter what I said or how I tried to explain, it always came back to her. I could feel myself getting frustrated. She's been trying to control this relationship from day one. She's jealous and scared of losing you, and she's using this to turn you against me. Elle just sighed like she'd heard it all before, swearing I was just making excuses. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I tried one more time to tell her it wasn't true, but she wouldn't budge. "I need a break," she whispered, like the words hurt coming out. "I can't keep going like this with all these doubts. I need space to figure things out." My heart just sank. It killed me watching someone I love slip away because of Stacy's lies. I wanted to reach out and make her understand, but the look in her eyes told me it was already too late. She grabbed her stuff and left without another word. Weeks went by, and things just got worse. No matter how much I tried explaining myself, Stacy's words had already done their damage. I knew I had to dig deeper and prove this wasn't just in my head, so I started going through social media, looking further back than I ever had before. That's when everything started clicking into place. Stacy hadn't just been making random comments to Elle. She'd been publicly trashing us for months, maybe longer. I found posts where she'd jokingly mocked me, saying I wasn't good enough for Elle. It was always wrapped up in this passive-aggressive humor, but the intent was clear. The deeper I looked, the uglier it got. I even found comments Stacy had made about Elle, stuff she'd never say to her face. She was painting Elle as naive and blind to what was going on in her own life. Stacy was playing both sides, making Elle doubt me while also making her doubt herself. It was seriously messed up. At first, I thought Stacy just wanted to keep Elle to herself. She was always there, always getting between us. But then I started seeing this deeper resentment. Stacy's bitterness wasn't new. It started way before I came along. She wasn't just trying to wreck our relationship. She was trying to tear Elle down too. But I couldn't figure out why. What happened between them that made Stacy so threatened by her own best friend? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I gathered all the evidence and confronted Elle. I showed her everything: the posts, the snide comments, the fake screenshots Stacy had sent. I watched her face change from confusion to disbelief as she read through it all. For a second, I thought she'd finally see it, finally understand how Stacy had been manipulating her. But instead, she just froze up. "This isn't what it looks like," she said quietly, shaking her head. She thought I was trying to turn her against Stacy. I tried staying calm, but her blindness was driving me crazy. Stacy had been doing this to us all along, but Elle just couldn't see it. She's jealous, I said, but Elle didn't want to hear it. Why would she be jealous? She's my best friend. She's been there for me through everything. You're the one trying to make this something it's not. I could tell she wasn't ready to face it, but I pressed on. She'd once mentioned that Stacy had some grudge against her from when they were younger. So I asked her what happened between them. Elle looked away and hesitated. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer, but then she finally opened up. In high school, the guys liked Elle, not Stacy, and it drove Stacy crazy. Elle never asked for the attention, but Stacy blamed her for no one noticing her. I stayed quiet, letting her talk, knowing there was more. There was this one guy, she continued. Stacy had liked him for years. He was her biggest crush. She was obsessed with him. But during senior year, he told me he had feelings for me instead. Stacy never got over it. I didn't even like him that way, but it crushed her when she found out. She stopped talking, and I could see her starting to put the pieces together. Stacy had been carrying this bitterness for years, and now she was letting it destroy everything. Elle shook her head, realizing it had hurt Stacy more than anyone thought, but still couldn't believe Stacy would do something like this. Not after all these years. I could see her struggling. Part of her knew the truth, but another part couldn't let go of the Stacy she thought she knew. Even as understanding started to dawn on her face, she still couldn't fully accept it. Stacy had such a hold on her, and I wasn't sure anything could break through that. Not even me. I decided to confront Stacy directly. I caught her alone one afternoon and brought up that conversation she supposedly had with Elle about seeing me with another girl. It was a straight-up lie, and I wanted her to admit it. At first, Stacy tried brushing me off like I was making a big deal out of nothing. But when I pushed harder, asking for specific details about when she supposedly saw me, she started cracking. Her story started falling apart. She couldn't keep her lies straight, and I knew I had her. I took everything I'd learned back to Elle. This time, when I laid it all out, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She finally saw how Stacy had twisted everything, played on her insecurities, and slowly drove us apart. Her eyes filled with pain and disbelief, and I could tell her whole world was crashing down. But by then, the damage was already done. Even though Elle cut ties with Stacy that night, the betrayal stuck around. It wasn't just Stacy who betrayed her. She felt betrayed by herself too. She doubted her own judgment, how she'd trusted someone for so long, and worst of all, she doubted what we had. We sat down to talk, and it was the hardest conversation we'd ever had. All the weight of everything, her lost trust, the manipulation, weeks of accusations. It was just too much. She admitted she was wrong to doubt me, but it didn't change the fact that those doubts had been there. She believed Stacy over me for too long, and that trust between us was broken. As much as we wanted to, there was no going back to how things were. Our relationship was too scarred. After a long, painful discussion, we both knew what had to happen. We weren't the same people anymore, and no amount of apologies or understanding could fix that. We agreed to break up. It wasn't dramatic. No yelling, no anger left between us, just this quiet sadness. As she walked out the door for the last time, the sting of it all really hit me. Looking back, I learned you need to spot red flags as soon as they pop up if you want to avoid toxic relationships. Sometimes I wonder, if I'd known all this sooner, could Elle and I have avoided ending things on such a sad note? That's how my first real relationship ended. Not with a bang, but with the quiet realization that sometimes love isn't enough when trust is broken. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories like this one.